Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking, everybody. Happy Monday. You made it through to Monday. Now all we've got to do is have a creative, productive, happy, upbeat week, right? Let's keep doing it. So many things to tell you about as we get started this morning. Today's episode is going to be sort of a continuation of the Friday episode. And on Friday, if you remember back, our cocktail night was a show was celebrating the first 5 years of the Ribbon Candy Hooking channel. Because the night before, I had received the notification from YouTube that that I had been on for 5 years, and I thought this must be a mistake, but it was true. And it got me looking at all day Friday. I was totally consumed with looking at our early episodes because I never watch them. I never have time. I know some of you binge watch from like the beginning to the end, but I myself have forgotten about some of the content that was in these early episodes that I think was important to rug hooking history, and I think it was important to our philosophy together at Ribbon Candy Hooking. The way that this brand has always revolved around inclusion, whatever style you do, whatever materials you do, whatever subject matter you do, you know that you have a home here and that we will talk about it and share it and celebrate it. And that will never change. So it's striking to me that looking back on those early episodes from like early 2000, it's so striking that we did so much good, serious, historical sort of backstage stuff at that time. We were going through much older books and saying names out loud that probably haven't been said for a very long time, talking about people who've been involved in rug making and pattern making through the decades and centuries at this point. So I had a bunch more slides in that slideshow, and I thought, let's do that this morning. Let's finish it up because there was quite a few other episodes I wanted to draw your attention to, particularly if you are a new viewer and you think like, oh, the live show's over, she won't be on again for a few days. There are, I don't know how many videos there are. I can never figure it out by looking at my own channel, but I know there's well over 1,000. It might be that there's like 2,000. I just don't know. Most of them are our live videos where we're together here talking and looking at books or exhibits or talking about what's coming, what's next, projects that we're working on, and looking at each other's work on gallery nights. So I hope that you will. I have to figure out what night gallery night will be, the January gallery night. But go ahead and send me whatever you're working on that you want me to show for gallery night, ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Go ahead and send that so that I have everything ready to go when we do have a gallery night. I don't think it'll be this Friday, although I'm not sure. Let's see how much material we get. And if there's plenty, I should have been promoting it is what I mean. I'm a little slow. If there's enough material, I'll run it this Friday. If not, I will do a heavy history episode this Friday. I think you all are asking for that. Or most of you are asking for that. And then the following Friday, we will do gallery night. This weekend on Saturday, I will be in Plymouth, Massachusetts in person at the Mayflower Guild, giving a talk on the Design Like series. And I will be bringing many of the I think all of the Design Like rugs that I have. So if I still have your Design Like rug, number one, I'm so sorry. And I should be communicating better and letting you know that I have been showing those rugs all over the place. If I am holding on to one of your rugs and you're waiting for me to mail it back, I'm going to mail them all back after this talk at the Mayflower Guild. But in the meantime, I should have let you know all along that every time I take that collection of rugs out, people are completely blown away, so inspired. They are absolutely beloved rugs and a big part of where rug cooking is today, right? That was a great survey of interpretations of fine artists in that collection of rugs. And super congratulations to you if you did it. I should have been telling you all along that people are just salivating looking at these rugs. One person said to me at one of the New York talks recently, I've been rug hooking for 30 years and I have not been excited since I started. I'm excited today. So these rugs have meant a lot to a lot of people. And One of these days, I need to work on the second one. I'm going to have a hell of a good start on Design Like 2, but I will get them up for another exhibit. But in the meantime, I will return them to you, and I'll think about whether Future Solder would be a good place to put books 1 and 2. We'll see how it goes. We'll figure that out together. But in the meantime, April, happy coffee time in Illinois. Welcome back, Cheryl on Cape Cod. Good morning to you too. Sunny and 39 there. That's not too bad. Not freezy, right? Not freezy breezies. Coffee ready. Sounds good. Karen, good morning. It is cold but sunny in Black Forest, Colorado. Great to see you. Fresh croissant in the oven and orange juice for breakfast. That sounds so civilized. I'm jealous. Catherine, great to see you in California. Happy Monday. Diane, happy Monday. It is sunny there in Fort Worth, Texas. Ah, that's where the sun is at. Goretti, great to see you up in Canada. It is snowing there in Acton. So much going on right now. I am a bit preoccupied with news and world stuff and all of that, and I don't bring that to the show, but I am a bit preoccupied. What I will tell you on a happy note before we get started with content is I did finish the Cordelia for February. So I don't have her out yet, but I need to block her and photograph her. Let me show you her. I'm gonna back up here. I've got my sweatshirt dress on. So I'm covered up well. So this is Cordelia 2. Again, I haven't blocked her, so she's not nice and stiff yet. But the first one was Ring in the New. Remember, Cordelia had her hat and her winter coat on, and she was putting laundry on the line, but also hanging bells up on the laundry line to ring in the new year. And that one said Ring in the New, and this one says, Will you be mine? And it's really bright colors. This will be available as a kit or as a pattern. And Cordelia's cat, who I don't have a name for, is introduced for the first time in this image. But I really love this piece. I say this often, but I think this might be the favorite piece I've done for myself to date. It's super primitive. It's still got really contemporary wild colors, a little bit of an 80s color palette. And since that's where I come from, that's what I really love. So this will be available soon. Just give me a little bit of time to block it, make it perfect, photograph it well. That was not farts, that was the bench. And I'll get that up online. Another thing that's coming up that's important to talk about, I can see some people logged on. I'll say hi in just a second. Do you remember? Do you remember we were talking about on a coffee time or a cocktail time? In the last 2 years, we were talking about the Caswell carpet, and I'll show you what it looks like. I think you'll remember. It is a carpet that was sewn. It is not a hooked carpet. It was sewn between 1932 and 1935 by Zerua Guernsey Caswell, and it's referred to as the Caswell carpet. Does this look familiar? This is a fraction of it. It is this enormous carpet. We've looked at a few of the motifs in it that are the most famous. This is currently at the Museum of Folk Art in New York City. It is not for view. I think the blue cat is probably the most famous motif from the Caswell carpet. In any case, I mentioned this the other day. Remember how we did the G's Bend sort of challenge last year, where so many people, hundreds of people downloaded the G's Bend pattern from Ribbon Candy Hooking and did it, and then we put it into one of the most recent issues of Magpie Times, and there was a separate Facebook page for the G's Bend project, and a lot of people got involved, and it was such a worthy project because everybody was working on the same pattern and a lot of different color palettes for each. A lot of people used different materials, and it became more of a multimedia collage project. So each one was special, different, and unique. And for that reason, we were kind of looking at them going apples to apples. Ooh, look what you did with yours, right? Not just, oh, I could do that technique. It's like, oh, you're sewing that part, or you're long stitching that part, or you're cross stitching or knotting that part. And I think so many people felt so inspired by that project because of the sameness. Looking at each other's patterns and going, ooh, maybe I want to do that there. So we want to bring that project back, not the G's Bend. We're going to move this year to the Caswell carpet. And I'm going to, over the weekend, I drew 24 of the squares that are present. And I think within and they will be available hopefully within the next 24 hours on Ribbon Candy Hooking for you to download as a PDF or a pattern, or I can put it on backing of your choice, rug warp, monk's cloth, linen, whatever you want. so that will be available soon. And Jeannie Coates is doing that project again. So I'm just on the periphery creating the projects, and I will talk more about the Caswell carpet itself because it's such a stellar and huge accomplishment for one little woman in the 1830s to make such an epic piece of textile history. So we will celebrate that by doing our own blocks from the Caswell carpet, and you can choose which one you want to do. Some are very, very simple and straightforward and would be perfect for beginners. Others are much more complicated and maybe more appealing. Whatever strikes your fancy is the one that you should do, and maybe you want to do multiples. So we will talk about this project more, and Jeannie Coates will be the person who is your kind of in-between for this project. She's your go-to person for this project, and she will be setting up a Facebook page again where you can show your progress as you work on blocks from the Caswell carpet. It will have a long timeline, and of course we will celebrate the end of it in Love Rug Hooking Magazine, but I would like to promote my own magazine. We will see the results of it in Magpie Times much later in 2025. And we're thinking about other things that we might be able to do on a larger scale with this project. I am thinking to myself, and we'll get sort of more ensconced in this conversation as time goes on. But I was kind of thinking about the fact, I'm trying to remember where this carpet came from. I know now it's at the the Folk Art Museum. But again, I'm going to have to research Zorua again. But I think it came out of Maine. And I remember talking about this with the Folk Art Museum in Manhattan. They have the only copy. They have the Caswell carpet, and because they have the Caswell carpet and it hasn't been on view for ages, and there's no plans to put it on view, nobody is looking at the Caswell carpet. And I kind of thought as like a pet project, because God knows I need another one of those. But I think it would be a really important project if anyone was interested in this angle, in maybe assembling some of the squares, or if not assembling them, displaying them together, or even donating a version of the Caswell carpet, like a replica, to the historical museum in the town where Zorua Guernsey Caswell lived as a gift. I thought that could be a really nice gesture. I am so hungry right now, and I just did a step exercise that almost killed me. So let's think about that angle too, because it could be that you do more than one block, and some of you want to participate in like a larger project, and maybe some of you don't. But we'll talk about all that as time goes on and we get our feet wet with this. Lisa, great to see you. Good morning. April, you love Cordelia. I do too. I love her so much. She's like just speaking through me. I've already started working on that book, and it will be a dye book. I did a video doing the face over the weekend because the face and the hair were the hardest part of this pattern. And you know, when you're doing something in the primitive style, this is primitive style, right? It's not detailed. This is not realism. When you're working in this style, it's, in my opinion, actually harder to get detail in an area like the face, because you want graphic detail, but you do not want like extreme detail. And you can see that the hair is really competing with the background. So I did a video over the weekend where I hooked the skin tone of her face. I hooked her face. It's just 2 loops in the cheek, 1 loop for each eye, a straight bridge up the nose, and 2 loops for the lips. And it was tricky. And if you watched the video, you saw I was teetering on very bad behavior and language, because 1 loop makes such a big difference when you're working in primitive style with a wider cut, and it's such a small area. And the thing about a face is there's an expectation. Unless you're Picasso, there's an expectation about what the face is meant to look like. So you don't want it to look like other people's faces, and you don't want it to look like someone you hate accidentally, like, you know, capture that likeness. But you do want it, at least I do want it to look like a face in this project anyway. So that video is there for you, and the pattern will be there for you. I just love this. I just love this series. There's so many more to come. The next one I'm working on is from March, and the image involves Cordelia with kites like up in the sky. It's a very cool image, and it's very different. I will be recording a video with Cordelia #1. Maybe today is a half day for Teddy, so that's a bit of a wild card for me, depending on how much he needs from me. You know what I mean? So I am going to record a video. I have them up here. I won't pull them down because they probably crack my head open. I got a huge set of 12 by 16 canvases, and I'm going to take the canvas off and mount the Cordelias onto these canvases in a video so you know how to quickly, with a staple gun or with a nail and some tacks, mount your pieces to have a gallery finish, and they're done. You don't even have to finish the edges, right? You're just stretching them around the sides. So I'm about to record a video on that subject too. There's lots happening. I will be teaching a series of Amish toothbrush rug classes as well. That was a mouthful. Amish toothbrush rug classes. So, and they will be kits. So I'll get those up to you in the near future too. But for the moment, all of the great things that we have ahead of us, let's look at some of the great things that have come before. Oh, wait a minute. CC, okay, wait a minute. We've got something going here. Robin, great to see you in Wisconsin. It's frosty in Wisconsin. Judy, you love her skirt. I do too. It's like a multicolor. So I'm going to have to, with the kits, I'll recapture like every color went into her skirt pretty much. It's a nice touch. It's like a confetti fill, right? It looks like, I was told cake frosting by a good friend. Cake frosting. It absolutely does. It looks like sprinkles. I can't wait for the February Cordelia. Oh, good. And CC name on Cordelia's cat. CC. So are you suggesting CC as a name? And Belvedere. Belvedere is a good name for a cat. It is a good name. I feel like I have to see. I know what the other sketches are with him. I need to look at them again to get a feel for who he is. You know how cats are so distinctive, right? So alarmingly distinctive. Grady, so bright and happy. Thank you. Jeannie, good morning. Good to see you. And Janice, good morning. Hello in Massachusetts. What part of Massachusetts? Have I asked you that yet? I would love to know because I will be in Plymouth on Saturday at the Mayflower Guild. I think it's in Plymouth or around Plymouth to give a talk. So I will be there all Saturday, and I'm really looking forward to that. Let's come back to our slideshow here. Let's see. God, I hope yes. I was going to say, God, I hope I can remember where we left off. Looks like we left off talking about bingo night. Remember, we were talking about bingo nights of yore. I'm going to kind of speed through this episode a little bit because we don't have 2 hours today, especially since Teddy is coming out of a half day. Why can't I find this? There we go. This image. There we go. Now, to recap where we left off, we haven't done bingo nights lately, and we haven't done trivia nights. We basically haven't illegally gambled on this channel recently. So I am thinking about that because I think the fun was not in winning the gift certificate. I'm hoping that the fun was in participating in the suspense of maybe winning anything. So I am Pepperell, Mass, on the New Hampshire border. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm going to have to look that up, Janice. What a beautiful name for a town, Pepperell. Oh, I love that. I know that area too. I just don't know that town. I go blazing through it, and I bet it's a beautiful town. So I'm going to move forward from here, but let's be thinking about whether we want to bring back game nights. We used to do game nights once a month. We would do either a bingo night or a trivia night that related to rug cooking, rug making in general. And I really, really, really enjoyed those times. So let's think about how we can bring it back without being naughty. Now, here's an episode from January of 2021, right? And the channel started right around this time. So we were just about at a year when I did this episode on June Miles, and I covered her book called If Wool Could Talk. Do you remember that book? It was so good. It was portraits of mostly men, semi-realistic with lots of color substitution. So it had a bit of a pop art feel to it. God, it was so interesting, so different. And I've tried to be in touch with her again recently. I would love to be in touch with her because I know at this moment there is an exhibit that involves her work that is about to open. So this is also a placeholder for to be continued because I would love, she's so humble, June. She's so humble. She's just not the one to toot her horn and say, look at my new work. So you kind of have to work for it. And I really want to remember to work for it with everything else on the calendar because her work is so outstanding. Speaking of things on the calendar, I keep forgetting to say Portsmouth Library, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Janice, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, through January 23rd, so 10 more days. There is a rug hooking exhibit up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I need to think about, I need to get up there. So I need to figure out how to do that. Let me think about that in the next 48 hours. I'd like to go to Portsmouth and look at the exhibit and record a video there. And if any of you are up there too, I'd love to meet you and fool around, maybe go get some food or something. So let's talk about that, because it's far, but it's not the moon. So I think we could do that. And I just want to remind you that that exhibit is happening at the Portsmouth Library in Portsmouth, New Hampshire until January 23rd. So we're getting there. Just over the border between Nashua and Townsend and Groton. Okay, yeah, I absolutely know that area. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I'd like to make a date up that way. So Janice, Portsmouth wouldn't be that far for you, right? Have you seen the exhibit yet? Maybe you've already seen it. Let's put a pin in that conversation, because I want to get back to that, and I want to get back to June Miles. This was the era on this show of discovering so many new names, new to me, right, all at once. Now, I remember this episode well, because it was kind of like in memory of Shannon Smith. She had passed away, and I love her work so much to this day. Yeah, I remember this was, for me, a very hard episode to execute, because I was just choking on every word. I had put a feeler out to some of her friends, and there were a lot of quotes that came in that I was reading online, and it was just killing me. And I never met Sharon Smith, but I absolutely love her work. All of her work now is at Cushing, right? I wish that I had it to reproduce and celebrate, but Cushing has got that line as well, which is great because it's available. So that was a wonderful episode. That was a heartbreaking episode, but God, what a lot of beautiful work. And doing these sort of memorial episodes. Speaking of memorial, I look miserable in this screenshot. Doing these memorial in memory of celebration episodes are so hard to do, and I know a lot of you, it's hard to watch, particularly if you knew the person and remember the person, but it's so important to document lifetimes of work, original work, commercial patterns, whatever someone has been doing with their time. It's so important to celebrate them and to not forget their legacy. In this episode, this was an interesting one. I started talking about Priscilla Turner rugs. That was the main conversation, because at this point I was just getting to know Judy Taylor, and now she and I publish Magpie Times magazine together, right? She does the editing and I do the other stuff, like the culling and a lot of the writing and theming and all that stuff. So we have two different roles, but we work on it together. At this point, I was just getting to know Judy Taylor, and I remember I was going through some kind of a haul that I got from a rug hooker's house, and there was a lot of Priscilla Turner rugs, and they were yarn rugs, and I couldn't tell if they were commercial, like if they were mass manufactured. And I ran this episode, the one I was just showing you, in February of 2021, and with a lot of questions, like I can only get so far with researching Priscilla Turner. Does anybody know anything about Priscilla Turner? And as coincidences happen, one of the Priscilla Turner family members. Now, Priscilla Turner was like a made-up name for this rug making company in Maine, in Turner Falls, Maine. So it was like Priscilla because it sounded like it was one of the common Mayflower names, like people coming off the Mayflower. So it seemed like it was a name with pedigree, and Turner for Turner Falls, Maine. And one of the family members, two of them actually got in touch with me and said, we know that was our dad's company. He took that over in, I think, the 1960s, and I think he died in the 1980s. And I started researching Priscilla rugs big time back then, and I'm still in process of researching Priscilla rugs. It's one of the many projects I've got going, and it's not that any of them are on the back burner. It's just, with this problematic calendar thing, 24 hours in a day is a real nuisance, because I need a lot more. But this was a great episode, because when I ran this episode, and then someone immediately wrote, because they constantly, the family does searches on the internet to see if anything is new about their, even though the company's been shut down for years. And I had a series of conference calls, and it was just so gratifying to know that if you build it, they'll come. If you say it out loud, people will answer, just like with the Molly Nye-Toby stuff. This was a great episode too, also in early February. This was a coffee time episode. I think I was still running 5 episodes a week at this time. I don't know how I did it. I didn't have a lot of orders then, I guess is how I did it. And I dropped the kids off for school, right? It was and they're still at school now, but yeah, somehow the days seemed to be a bit more kind, the hours in the day anyway. So in this episode, I talked about a very important name in rug hooking history, one of Canada's own icons, Elizabeth Lafleur, and to my knowledge, the fastest hooker ever, like literally ever, making these huge tapestries and tableaus of biblical scenes, political scenes, portraits of presidents, Canadian figures and celebrities, just an unbelievable body of work. If you don't know the name Elizabeth Lafleur, yeah, you must look her up. I was reviewing a beautiful book on her life and her sort of biography and her work in this episode. So if you're interested, you can search back. That's why I'm leaving the title of the episode, because if you're thinking, "Ooh, I'm working on something," and that could be helpful. Um, then write down the date. As I say that, this one doesn't have a date, but here's the title. It'll come up by the title too. This was an episode I recorded. I don't think this was a live coffee time, but this is a wool dyeing technique, hand painting with squirt bottles for rug hooking. So for those of you who are like, oh, I'd like to get involved in dyeing my own wool or cotton or whatever, and I'd like to paint it myself. I did a lot of techniques in this video using hairdresser squirt bottles, just filling them with dye. This is, mostly Dharma, Cushing, and Procam dyes. And I'm showing you how to do some very sort of geometric patterning in this episode. It looks very complicated, but I'm just doodling. I'm just doodling with a hairdresser bottle directly onto the wool and about to put it into the oven. So everything you need to know about this technique is in this episode. I think I was preparing for doing the pattern, the monthly pattern that was a Klimt pattern, a Gustav Klimt pattern. And I wanted some wools that looked really patterned, but that were not cotton, that were super substantial, aka actually wool, but that had a strong geometric backbone. And that's what I was working on in this video. Now, when you put it into the oven, it bleeds a little bit. So it turns into a very colorful piece of material. And it's a joy to hook with something like this and color something like this, because there is an element of surprise when the piece comes out of the oven. Like, with most recipes, you kind of know what you're getting. With stuff like this, how much it bleeds depends on how damp the fiber is. And I tell you all of this stuff in the video so you can be thoughtful about, is it soaked? Is it damp? Is it dry? Is it something in between? It's a really solid video. I think it's a good video if this is where your head is at. Judy says, I'm overwhelmed with all I have missed in the first few years. I feel like I have a whole university course waiting for me. There's a lot of content there, Judy. Thank you. It's all there, and hopefully it'll be there. Hopefully nothing happens with YouTube ever, because this is history. I have to figure out how to make this all safe. But yeah, it's all there for you when you have time and when you feel like it. This was another important episode with Canadian interest. February 9th, I began the story of Lillian Burke. So she's an important teacher and kind of the head of a rug hooking community where she positions herself as a teacher, and it's sort of a charitable endeavor where they will, like most missions, sell the rugs and, create work for a community that is limping along economically. So I'm also looking at the thread. That's what all the ums are about. I love to see you all chatting and finding each other. On February 15th, President's Day. Oh, this was a fun episode. Because we were just talking about patriotic and presidential rugs. And in this episode, that's a silly face. In this episode, we were talking about a lot of the Elizabeth Lafleur rugs because she hooked so many American presidents. That was a bit of an oxymoron, wasn't it? But she hooked so many portraits of presidents. And there were I think this episode also contained some Lincoln history and there was one other earlier president that actually hooked rugs. Shame on me for not remembering off the top of my head, but it's here for you in this episode. So it's presidents. I think there's one president who hooked, and family members, relations of presidents who hooked, presidents who had hooked rugs in their dwellings. Oh, Leah, good to see you. And actually hooked rugs of presidents. So everything that fit that President's Day title came into this episode, and it was a jam-packed episode that I think was really a lot of fun. This was a total departure later in February, British inspiration. I started to go down the rabbit hole like crazy style, and I was talking about the tradition of British rug making, rag rugs and proddy rugs. So not necessarily rug hooking, but that much more sort of scrappy and thrifty tradition of doing proddy and doing rag rugs, lots of sort of geometrics, red diamond motifs to ward off evil at the front door. Lots of kind of lore about British rug making traditions and superstitions, right, which form the patterns and the placement of rugs. And this whole episode I thought was really interesting and a good introduction to a couple of months where I would pretty solidly hammer out episodes that were about specific conversations that had to do with British rug making. In this episode, you see this was about non-traditional materials. So we were not talking about wool in this episode. We were talking about every other material that you can think of. What was this one? February 22nd, Weekend Finds. Okay, Adopt Me rugs. So this was the first episode I did on this channel where we were looking at rugs that I had found on, for example, every one of these screenshots is awful, isn't it? God, who cares, right? You've seen me before. It's not good. We were talking about finding rugs like on Facebook Marketplace, on eBay, on your equivalent of Facebook Marketplace. I know for Heidi in the Netherlands, it's Marktplaats. I know in different countries you have different names for like this sort of secondhand network that is not eBay. That sort of interpersonal, can I come pick it up in my car kind of thing. And I had found, I think, a bunch of rugs that were Adopt Me rugs that were partially finished. And we started the conversation about, there's so many people out there who have been hooking rugs forever. And, if you have been hooking rugs since the earth cooled and you feel like, I have enough rugs, I'd like to do something different. It's a great idea to find rugs that, online and in antique stores and whatever, that other people have not finished, and just finish them to the best of your ability. You're not going to match the colors exactly. It's not going to happen, but you can get pretty damn close. And it just feels good to pick up work that somebody left off for whatever reason, and to complete it, right? To bring it to the finish line. It's like dragging your partner across the finish line in the Olympics. It's a nice thing to do. And I love the idea of the Adopt Me rugs. Liza, good morning. Great to see you. Great to see you. So that was a fun episode, and it opened up a lot of conversations for us about, how the many ways in which we can spend our time. More British rag rugs. You see, when I lock into something, I'm like an animal, like a rabid dog, and I get my teeth into something, and then I go off on crazy tangents and order every book that's ever been written on the subject, and we go down incredible rabbit holes. But that's how we become, in my opinion, like experts on these conversations. Putting all of this information together and like culling it is how we get a baseline on these historical conversations that have to do with the history of rug hooking, because it's not all in one place. I wish that it was, but it's not. And honestly, there's too much of it. But the more that we talk about different angles, different aspects, different schools, different sort of heritage, geographical differences of rug hooking historically, the more we have these conversations, the more I think we fully understand what a rich and varied craft we're working in. This was a bit of an extension of that subject in March of 2021. I think I probably was very inspired by I inspired myself by the episode of the earlier one on the non-traditional materials in the British rag rug tradition. And I started cutting up t-shirts and all kinds of jersey and stretch material and hooking with it. And I also started recording a lot of videos at that time, cutting up t-shirts and using those for hooking. And this was a very uphill time for ribbon candy hooking because not everybody was digging it. We have been solidly in different camps for a long time as rug hookers, and I'm very happy that is giving way, because I remember during that time I would bring projects to meetings and stuff, and always like kind of heart on the sleeves stupidness arriving and thinking everybody's going to be really nice, and then people making all kinds of remarks about me hooking with t-shirt material. T-shirt material, people have been hooking with their scraps and their cut up clothing since day one, right? It's only in the 20th century that we start saying, oh, I need only milled wool and give me cutter number 3 and 4. That's for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's nothing wrong with the other thing either. Jessica said, good morning, Jessica. I'm working on a project for Magpie. Yes. Leah is too. Funnily enough, I am too. I'm working on my stuff right now. So in this episode, we talked about Happy DeFranza, and I love her. I was lucky enough to meet her at, what is it, in Cape Ann, Beauport, the Sleeper McCann house, beautiful historic house, the Sleeper McCann house. We had like a field trip there, if you remember, or if you were there with me that day. We went to Cogswell Grant in Ipswich and the Sleeper McCann house in Gloucester. And God, we must have seen 200 rugs collectively that day. It was absolutely incredible. But I had been to Beauport, the Sleeper McCann house, slightly earlier. And I went on a day when Happy DeFranza was there restoring one of the Mercedes and James Hutchinson rugs. It's called the Magic Carpet. She was doing a replica of it because that rug had really had it. So I was able to meet her there, and then I began researching her life and her story and her brand. What a lovely woman she is. And I ran this episode on March 16th, 2021, about her work, about her life, what her designs look like. That brought us to another sort of day trip inspired episode. Stella Hay Rex has associations to the Hillstead House. Had to think for a second there. It's the Hillstead Museum now in Farmington, Connecticut. And I had recently been there with my friend Liz, and we were looking at some of the rugs that were there. And I think it was Stella Hay Rex. Maybe it was Amy Malley. Now I'm confused. In any case, this episode was based on text. It was based on, I think, a 1940s full-length book, a black and white book in the form of like a novel, right? That kind of a book, not a workbook or an oversized book, about designing your own hooking patterns. And while there were line drawings in it and black and white images of rugs, it was a remarkably helpful and inspiring book. And it did represent one moment in time, the moment that she wrote it. And it's curious and interesting to read texts on this craft from that period. But this is Stella Hay Rex, in the end, wrote 2 books. I think 3 if you count By Hook or by Crook, which was like a comedy sort of memoir. But really, I think, really interesting person, really good episode. And Judy says, you shouldn't have to spend $800 to even start a thrift craft. You blasted right past all the gatekeepers. Thank you. Thank you. The gatekeepers didn't like it because they were selling lots of $78 hooks and, $600 cutting machines. And, there's a place for that, but it's not at the beginning of the craft because like I bought the step that I'm stepping on to do my step classes on the computer, right? In the morning, I just I subscribed to a YouTube channel, so I could do her workouts. And, I used to step 20 years ago and I loved it. But now I have like a bit of a fat ass syndrome. Like I've put on like 50 pounds. So I'm like not really sure-footed anymore. And I thought it might be that I trip over the step or whatever. So I bought a super cheap step, $15 at Aldi. It was there in the aisle with the groceries. So I thought, let me try on this step and let me see if I bust my junk. Then obviously it's not for me. I'll stick to weightlifting and like walking stuff and whatever. But I'm going to give it a shot. And I am not giving it a shot with a step that costs like $150, if there is such a thing. I bet there is, because I bet they come with weights and accessories and stuff. But absolutely, it makes no practical sense. And there's no reason to be pressured into that. The thing is, this is a naughty sentiment, but the thing is, if you go to a rug hooking store, which I highly recommend because they're wonderful, but if you go to a rug hooking store to learn how to hook for the first time, you will be sold all the materials, right? You'll be sold milled wool and an excellent hook and a frame and possibly a cutting machine. And you might, depending on what your bank account looks like, if it looks like mine, you will exit feeling like you have stomach cramps and like you hate the craft because you overspent and now super negative associations. So you always have to do what's best for you, but certainly this craft can be done on a shoestring budget. You can actually do this craft with a shoestring. You can take the shoestrings out of your extra sneakers and hook with them. Seriously, I'm not joking. You can wash them and then hook with them. This was an episode I did with, or a show I did with Joss when she was so little. Look how cute and little she was. This is when she loved everything I did and I wasn't so boring and annoying and always asking her to do her homework. This is when everything I did was like, I was amazing. I really miss this time. Dyeing wool yarn with food coloring. So we had our Briggs & Little yarn out, the 3-ply. I sell 2-ply and 3-ply at Ribbon Candy Hooking. And we were going to use it for a punch needle project, which I think we did, but we were dyeing with food coloring because obviously aniline dyes, chemical dyes, are not safe. And we wear masks when we handle the powders and gloves, and they're not safe to inhale. Same with garment dyes. If you're leaching color out of garments and linings, not safe to inhale. Well, it's safe to inhale because it's just hitting the water in the case of garment dyes, but not safe to use the same pans, right? Because at the end of the day, it was originally a chemical dye. So we're looking for different options in this video, and I'm making the point that dyeing with food coloring, we might have dyed with some sprinkles here too, is a great thing to do because you can do it with your kids. You can do it without buying a different set of pots and pans for your dyeing because they will be safe to use for your food afterward. So this is one of those dyeing videos that's making the point, hey, are your kids or your grandkids coming over soon? Do some food color dyeing with them. Just dye some stuff. It's almost time, we're almost going to see the Easter PAS, right? PAAS dyes and all the ripoff dyes. They're all the same in the end, the tablets, in the stores again soon. And I do have different videos on dyeing with the Easter tablets. I know I did videos last year of dyeing with the Easter tablets. I think I've done several years of dyeing with stuff that I got out of those Easter boxes to dye eggs, right? That'll be hitting the shelves really soon. And that's non-toxic stuff. So same idea if you'd prefer not food coloring. I think in the video that I was just referring to, I think I used, God, I have such a vicious little deep cut on my hand. I must have touched my comb. I think I use the microwave as the heating source in that. You can use like mason jars if it's hot enough out. Not right now for us in New England anyway. But I think I must use the microwave as the heating source to set the color better. In this video, I went over my friend Naomi's house. Neither of us are looking good at all here, but we had a blast. We had a blast. We had a great conversation. I was talking about her brand. We were chatting together. We need to do more of this. We are both on the board of Tigger at this moment. This ushered in an era of meeting with my local friends. This is Michelle McArelli. She lives 10 minutes from me. I see her quite a bit. I don't go often to Hook as much as I should, but I often go over to pick up linen, fool around for a few minutes, have some hard alcohol, and then I usually take off. But I think it's time to do another show with her. I love her. We all love her. She is a legend. She is an icon. Incredible body of work. Plenty of crazy talk and lots of really heartbreaking and heartwarming stories all at once. She is like, I keep telling her she needs to write a book, and she keeps saying she doesn't want to do the writing part, which means I would do the writing part, which means that is one of the things on my list of things to do because I want to see all of her stories that refer to all of her classic canon of rugs, if you will. I'd like to see all that documented because she really is an icon. I've done 2 shows over there with her and plenty of fooling around. Here's my favorite person who I have collaborated with, my sister. Do you remember this episode? It was a long episode. I think it was an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours long. We did a Zoom together. And she was in her studio at the British Art Center at Yale. She's the restorer there, that she does all the restoration on important examples of British art, emphasis on the sort of Tudor and Elizabethan periods. And we found some common ground to talk about. I see her all the time. She's my sister, and she lives locally. She lives in New Haven. In fact, I'll see her tonight. We found some common ground talking about dye color and talking about the difference between she handles dyes, she creates dyes according to original recipes, right, that are hundreds of years old, to restore paintings, right, where she needs exactly the same pigment, and she needs the pigment to behave in the same way historically, so that 200 years from now, that pigment will be behaving the same way that that whatever oxide-based pigment originally painted in the 1500s, same way as that. So we got to talking about the way that dyes work in fine art versus fiber art. And it was a long conversation, and she took us through the digital designs by PJ. Hey, good to see you. Welcome. Cat's Gallery says, I've ordered a book from Michelle that you talked about on the show. She included a thoughtful card. Oh, she's such a sweetie. She's such a sweetie. I'm so glad. Was it the Barely Hooked, Catherine? The Barely Hooked book? What was I going to say? Or maybe it was her, was it her, the tarot, the Spiral Tarot book? Anyway, this was a great episode. If you're interested in color, the history of color, and the chemistry of color, the science of pigment, this was a great episode. It was very in-depth, and it ended with a pattern. It was a sea monster pattern that I took off of a portrait that she kept referring to. There was an Elizabethan portrait. I forget who the person was. I say it in the episode. But she's got this beautiful, huge dress on. Of course, it had the panier, the basket sides on the dress. And it was all done in sewn needlework embroidery. Incredible, like silk. I mean, it was incredible, the pattern, but it was of a sea monster, which was really, it was like repeated waves and a sea monster. And I made a pattern of that, which I put up after that show. And I thought that pattern would never sell because it was so complicated. I sold a ton of that pattern, and I think just about everybody made it into a pillow because at the end of the day, it had a bit of like a William Morris feel. It was a bit tessellated, like Eschery. It was a repeat pattern, but it had different sea monsters in each place. It was a very cool pattern. And I loved that show. I loved being with her on camera. She did some tremendous prep, so I think we really pulled it off. All right, where did we go? I have so many examples here. It's hard to keep finding my place. Hold on, I'm cut off. Oh, April 19th, Sadie's Winter Dream and the Maine Seacoast Mission. Oh man, this was a great episode. Now, Sadie's Winter Dream is one of the most rare rug hooking books. So I think to this day, it's going to be hard to get. And I covered it, I think, very well in this episode. So if you watch this episode or have watched this episode and you struck out with finding the text, just look again or put a permanent search into eBay until you find it. It will be expensive because it's super rare. There were not very many printed. But man, it is one of the most beautiful, heart-wrenching kind of stories, right? It's a mission story of a community that was poor and making money with their rug making. And it has so many personal, beautiful anecdotes and so much beautiful storytelling in it. Really wonderful book, and you'll get a great feel for whether or not you need to have this book by watching this episode, because I covered it like really, I think, quite thoroughly here. April 26th, still talking about the Maine mission. Maine mission is the rug hooking. Again, it's like, I don't want to say a school, it's a mission, charitable mission, where a teacher will install him or herself into a community that is poverty stricken, where there really are no sort of economic options and solutions for the population. And the idea is to teach women how to hook so that the rugs that they produce can then be transported to market, usually in the US, in New York, in the big cities, in department stores, and bringing in income to much needed communities. This has been going on since the late Victorian period, and the Maine mission is one of the missions we hardly ever talk about. So a book came out about the Maine mission, and I read the book, and I'm talking about it in this episode. It's one of the missions that we don't talk about enough, right? It's one of the sort of smaller, in terms of timeline, one of the smaller missions. And here we are talking about, in this episode, I can't see when this one premiered, but we are talking about, for the first time, Kent. And we go on to talk about Kent in many episodes of Coffee Time, because he writes, along with Pearl McGowan, right? She writes 4 of the most important books on rug hooking to date. William Winthrop Kent writes 3 important books starting in the 1930s. Pro McGowan's books are a little bit later, but of course Pro McGowan was working in the 1920s already in rug hooking. So their timelines overlap, very different points of view, but both really important pioneers of rug hooking, shoring up the history of early hooking collectively these 7 books. But Winthrop has 5 books, and yeah, we start talking about him there, and we basically haven't stopped talking about him. This is one of my favorite episodes of all time, May 5th. I read you a chapter of a book. It's one of my favorite memoirs. It's from 1962. It is not a well-known book. The book is called Sold to the Lady in the Green Hat. You'll have to look up. Oh, Emma Bailey. Holy crap. Did you just hear that? I was just possessed. I think it's Emma Bailey. I just pictured the cover of the book, and there was the name on the cover. I don't even know where that book is anymore. It's somewhere. But I read a chapter of this book because she was the first female auctioneer, I think not just in Vermont, but in the country. And she wrote a whole chapter of her memoir about making a hooked rug runner for her stairs and designing each riser to have a different story from their family history. And it is a comical, fun, and also super informational. She's not teaching you how to hook, but it's curious to hear about her method, her process for transferring, the way she hooked. It's an adorable book with a bunch of crazy kind of madcap but true episodes from her long career as a live auctioneer, and again, the first female auctioneer in this country. It's a great, funny book, but a whole chapter designated to her rug. And so I read the whole chapter in this episode, and it was like a bit of a story episode. This was a fun episode. It was a cocktail night. You can see I'm with my mom again. We were looking at rugs that referred to proverbs and funny sayings. And it sounds like, how could there be any? But I mean, yeah, sometimes when I run these coffee time and cocktail time episodes, I will work for several days on content for the episode. To this day, sometimes it's the way that it is. So it's just one of these things. I must have stumbled across a few rugs that had text and funny sayings. I'm sure there's a lot of Hutchinson rugs in here. But we were able to do a whole 2-hour episode on it, and we were having some great laughs. And that was a fun Friday night. I remember that like it was yesterday. Here's another important episode from May 11th, 2021, where I'm talking about Mrs. Harry King. And she is one of the important players mid-century, 20th century. And she is one of the players that we hardly ever talk about anymore. I talk about her often on this show, but in general, you could go your whole life without hearing the name Mrs. Harry King. And she is important in terms of the design, connecting rug hooking patterns to, now what was it? I think it was, what is it? Not Bernina, Burr. Come on, help me, Burr something. It's not Bernina, right? Maybe it was Bernina. In any case, she, like Pro McGowan with Sturbridge Village, Mrs. Harry King sort of aligned with a larger sewing craft company and was selling her patterns very mainstream through a much larger umbrella, and for that reason had a lot of visibility, a lot of sales, and in her own way promoted the craft by having it be very, very visible with this much, like piggybacking on a much larger outfit. Liza, you love Sold to the Lady in the Green Hat. It was fun from beginning to end. Oh, did you read the whole book too? It was such a funny book because she gets into such bad situations with like crooks who are selling her, like, I don't know if you can say hot furniture, but like stolen estate stuff. And it's such a funny book. A Barbara said session with Jess on pigments and dyes sounds fascinating. Bookmark. It was a great episode. It's a heavy episode because it's a very intellectual episode for this show. She has a much more sort of highbrow calling than I do. And it was a bit of a highbrow episode, but it was a lot of fun. And since I was conducting the interview, don't worry. I brought it down to a base level quite a few times to make it manageable for my ears too, Another Mission episode, Helen Albee and the Abenaki rugs, right? There's like 3 different ways you can spell Abenaki. This was a great episode, and this led me to write the first chapter of the Design Like book, which was the Helen Albee Abenaki chapter, and talking about her book from 1900, the actual year, about dyes and dyeing that contained absolutely no images and could not see what her rug designs were. But we know that she was only interested stylistically in Native American designs. So she did not cross over to anything that reeked of flowers or scrolls or European design. She stuck with Native American design, and for that reason, her mission in New Hampshire was very, very different in the way that those rugs looked and the intention. So that was an interesting history episode too. More name dropping, right? All names that we should know. Liza says, yes, I read the whole book. Fascinating to hear all the stories. I'm an antique collector as well, and I have been to many auctions. Great learning from the other side. It's exactly that, wasn't it? It was like a little bit of an insider's window. I love that book. Judy says, Sold to the Lady in the Green Hat is expensive in hardcover, but it's available on Kindle. Oh, no way. It's available on Kindle for $3.99. Boom, there it goes. Andrea, I need to send you a message, right? I want you to know that I'm thinking about you and I love you. I need to send you a message. This episode, okay, I was just talking about her, Amy Malley Hicks. I think I misspoke earlier. I think it's Amy Malley Hicks who's associated with the Hillstead House / Museum in Farmington. And she also wrote a book in the same, like 5 years, as Stella Ray, what was it? Stella Hay Rex. These are hard names, aren't they? But they both wrote early books on the craft of rug hooking that included, drawings of how you hold your hand, how to cut up burlap, how to build a frame with nails and scraps of wood. Similar books, but very different voice and different design ideas. So these are both books that are in my library and both books that I covered. Took a total departure around this time. Ooh, did you know before? Hello from Pakistan. Well, hello to you. Super, super welcome. Let me come on to camera and say, great to see you. Welcome. Very happy that you're there. Now, I did a 360 coming from this sort of historical early 20th century school of rug hooking. I did a dogleg turn here, and I got involved with, I got, as the kids at this moment would say, obsessed with mid-century latch hook design. And I went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Cindy, hello in Texas. I went cuckoo because I found a lot of the early catalogs, that offered latch hook and rug hooking patterns. And the rug hooking patterns really were punch needle patterns, right? They were the shuttle punch. They weren't rug hooking, but they were billed as rug hooking. You weren't hooking. I mean, hooking applies, you're holding a hook, but most of these rugs were designed to work with the shuttle punch, which is not a hook. Doesn't matter. It's just like a failure of language. But some of those early catalogs struck me as really interesting because we know the evolution from later episodes. We know the evolution from Rhea rugs coming from Scandinavia, and we visited Melinda Bird, right? I went down to see her in Maryland. She's keeping the tradition of Rhea rugs alive because her family was heavily involved in bringing them to this country. We know that latch hook came kind of as like the poor cousin of Rhea rugs, right? Not wool. We're talking about pre-cut acrylic yarn, but we're still talking about a high pile rug. And it's so curious when you look at mid-century latch hook patterns, they were so beautiful before we hit the 1970s, right? And if you're a great vintage lover and you're like, oh, I love me some butterscotch and brown and avocado green owls. I'm not judging that at all. I love me that sometimes too. But generally, it's not a universal or a timeless look, the latch hook that we saw in the 1970s as an answer to the Rhea rugs, but a more economical answer. So there was such a sort of departure from the history of latch and what latch could be, because some of those early latch rugs are absolutely exquisite. And that's what I was looking at in this period of coffee time. We were looking at designs of rugs. I'm going to run over a little bit. I'm going to try to run over not that much because I got to pick up my man. But it is interesting to get back into conversation. So that was June 19th, in what latch hook looked like originally, right? Before we hit the 70s and skid out. 70s owls and what else was common in the 70s? I guess eagles. In the 80s, we hit like the unicorns and the Smurfs and yeah. the latch hook as a craft, I think, was kind of hijacked. Goede Eva Heidi was kind of hijacked, I think, by brands. And yeah, it really lost the art, right? The art that was originally there. In this episode on June 21st, I talk about Charlotte Stratton, and she is another character from the early / mid-century, 20th century. Mushrooms, thank you, Barbara. That is a 70s motif, big time. Trippity trippy mushrooms. Charlotte Stratton was not just an author like Amy Hicks Phillips and Stella Ray Hicks. She was an author, but she also certified people as in this, like, not in the McGowan style, in her own style. So she was her own teacher. She had her own school, her own style, and she certified many people. We always think of Pearl McGowan as the person who certified everyone. She wasn't. There were a lot of names at that time, people who certified people who just wanted to be good hookers or who wanted to go forth and multiply and teach other people. So she's one of the big names of that period. You can see in this episode, it's July 2nd. I think this was, this photo, I think this was the phase of Jocelyn becoming obsessed with making balloon dogs. Like, our lives revolved around balloon dogs. We are having a patriotic episode here. So we're doing an early 4th of July. You can see I'm wearing my patriotic dress and some patriotic earrings. And we have got some balloon dogs on our head just for bling. This might have been the episode where she was making live balloon dogs for you. And, oh, April, perfect. Oh, that's perfect, right? Exercise with company. Man, that's what I need in my life. Oh, God, I hate exercising. So this was a fun episode. This is a hilarious picture. Look at Joss's face. And Teddy, it looks like, well, I was going to say it looks like the balloon is up his nose. It could indeed be that the balloon is up his nose. But we were talking about Lady Emma. Lady Emma's book about ragrugs, the history of ragrugs in England in this episode. So it wasn't necessarily a patriotic episode, although I did many patriotic episodes on July 4th of the respective years. But this seems like it was a book-based review on this cocktail night. It was a super, super fun episode. I love Lady Emma's book. This one, July 7th, still in the British tradition. So I was still kind of dancing around the idea of thrift rugs, ultra green rugs that are made only from scraps, and in the British tradition, which is a bit more raggy and less precise, less realism, right? More energy, more mixed materials, totally different school of hooking. And in this episode, I was talking about Sandra Hardy. So look up these names if you're interested in adding to your library, right? These are all people who wrote important books on the subject. And if you love the history part of it, these episodes are here for you. It might be that I touch on the same names in the future, and I probably will. But there's so much new stuff happening too. I'm often torn. This episode was about using stretch velvet. And not everybody likes to hook with stretch velvet, but I do. And I was talking about the pros and cons of using stretch velvet, right, which is synthetic. I'm not talking about velveteen. I'm not talking about silk or cotton velvet. I'm talking about stretch velvet, synthetic. And I'm hooking with it here. And yes, it kicks up a lot of lint and dust. And yes, it can drive you nuts. But man, is it lush and luminous and rich and easy to work with and easy on your hands. So this is a great informational episode on stretch velvet. Here we are with another fairly rare and expensive book. I'm sorry about that, but this book changed my life. This book talks about, it's just called Hooked Rugs. See if you can find this. Pull up the episode. See if it's interesting to you. This is a very expensive book. I'm warning you, it's going to be a serious sticker shock moment. But I had to have this. It's about modernist rugs, and there are examples of early 20th century rugs in this book that I show in this episode that I've never seen before and I have not seen since. It's an important book, but only if you're interested in the abstract. This book is about the commercial rugs that were, I'm definitely running over, but I have time. I don't have to pick up Teddy. I have to be there for like 25 minutes. That book talks about that period of design where very famous interior designers, not necessarily textile designers and not rug designers, but very famous names in interior design were being pulled to design rugs for commercial use. And in some cases that were bought by department store buyers, in some cases were hand hooked and sold in a one-of-a-kind setting, or mass-produced, hand-hooked, extremely expensive, like the same way that an oriental loomed rug would be super expensive, handmade and super expensive, but there's more than one. So this episode was about that moment in rug making where using famous, at that time, famous names in design, those names were used as like a vehicle to sell you some room-sized, giant, very high art rugs, abstract modernist rugs. These are not florals, right? This is very, very different to sort of advertise and promote that modernist era of design, the MCM period that we hit in the 1950s, 1960s. It was a very fun episode to record, and I when I think about the images that are in that book, my heart still races. All right, let's see where we're at. I'm going to flip through a few more before I sign off. Oh man, I had to show you this. This was a short advertisement. Look at her. Jocelyn being so cute and young. This is when she still enjoyed tap dancing, and she's in her soda jerk costume. I recorded this like short video of her showing the ice cream swatch set, which I think I discontinued. If you like any of these older products, just let me know. If enough people like them, I can bring some of these back. But this was the soda jerk ice cream set. And the inspiration was she was dancing in a tap dancing show, and she was dressed as a little soda jerk, and it made me want to do something with ice cream. And I ended up collaborating with Diane Collins Tobias on a piece that featured these colors, and all of them, and also some of her pink stretch velvet. It was a cornucopia adapted to an ice cream cone, if you remember that pattern. I really liked that pattern. This was an interesting episode too. We were talking about just Midwest rug hooking in the early days. This was another episode I really had to research hugely because I knew I was looking at a handful of names, and there's not a lot of information online when you're looking for specific people in rug hooking. So this was one of those episodes. I might have been using a text as a skeleton to build on, but this is one of those episodes that a lot of research went into it, and it's filled with history. This one as well, Alice Butler. I went on to fall in love with Alice Butler, Vic Butler, Rob, the whole family, and I still carry the Alice Butler patterns. I have got to do something more with the Alice Butler patterns. I wrote a feature for Rug Cooking Magazine, maybe last year or the year before, called Fairy Tale, Rug Cooking Fairy Tale, about the relationship between Alice Butler and her son Rob, how they worked in this magical manner for decades between the 1950s and the 1980s, doing so many rug designs that were all original, designed by Rob and hooked by his mom Alice. And it was magic. It was absolute magic. I did a lot of shows on Alice Butler, and if you remember, Vic, who designed the rugs, was still alive when I did these videos. He died in December of 2021. So I had recorded a ton of videos, and he was able to sit up in bed and watch them, and he passed away soon after I recorded the last video. And he was so happy that we were talking about his work and that people were logging in on this channel and looking at his life's work. So that was a great sort of gift for me, for him, I think for his family at the end of his life, that there was some degree of recognition within the rug cooking community that his work was being finally seen. This was an episode where I started talking about the great 1970s, 1980s artist Anne Wiseman. She put out many books on textile design, rug making, quilting, surface design for textiles. You'll never get tired of Anne Wiseman books. There's quite a good variety of them out there. And in this episode, I'm showing you a piece of tie-dyed wool that I had just done in a class. But that was mainly an Anne Wiseman episode. And also Alert. There's a dyeing class in our catalog as well that, in the list of videos that is about tie-dyeing wool, because that comes out really well as well. This was an episode that was live in an antique store where my daughter Jocelyn kept picking up hooked rugs that were so done. Like they had giant, huge holes in them. And she was so invested in the conversation on rug hooking and being part of the show. She had me buy all of them, and I still have them. And I'm still thinking about ways to repair the holes, but man, she came up with some dirty skunks that I still feel like after, 3,000 showers since then, I still feel like I'm not clean. They were all beautiful rugs, but some of them really, really bad. But a great episode, right? And a great conversation on talking about what's possible when you encounter a rug that you love, but it has damage. What's possible? It was the Cove. Barbara, it was the Cove in New Bedford. It absolutely was. I have to say the Cove has gotten better. Like there's always rugs there. So I never find great rugs there, I have to say. They're always quite damaged. I find great rugs in New Bedford at the Acushnet Center, the other center. There used to be a third center that was my favorite, and that's closed a few years ago. But Acushnet is great, and the Cove is great. You will find rugs, but I've never found like an important one for myself. But we were totally there, and the Cove has gotten better. They have gotten so much larger in the last couple of years. It's so much fun to go there. Okay, I'm not sure why I put this up because this is another episode on Anne Weisman. I want you to know that name, honestly, because you are going to love her. Whether or not you love her rug books the most or her textile books the most, you are going to love her. Rug Hooking Coffee Club. I was calling it Coffee Club for a minute, I guess. Tuesday, August 31st. What does this beautiful... Oh, this was that live episode with Teddy where I found that rolled up rug on burlap that was like atomizing in my hands. I found it in Maine. I found it in Maine, right on the New Hampshire border on Route 1, one of those antique stores right there. And it had a Native American pattern. And I thought, oh my God, is it a Helen Albee Abenaki rug? And me and Teddy unrolled it carefully live. And no, it wasn't. It was a beautiful rug, but I think it was an heirloom rug. I was a bit disappointed, but it was a fun episode because it might have been the first Abenaki rug that ever came through my fingers. This was another important episode. This was about bed rugs and looking at Jessie Armstead Marshall's incredible paperback, oversized kind of trade-sized book on bed rugs, right? The history of bed rugs. These would be rugs with two G's or GGES. These are not hooked rugs. These are sewn rugs, but high-piled loops using a little kind of chopstick tool to make sure the loops stand up, right? Not rug hooking yet, historically, using a needle, but still getting a loop with what you would do with a hook, but you can tell that it's not because of the back. You actually see the stitching. On this episode, we were looking at my friend Crystal's rugs, right, from Chatelaine magazine. We were looking at there was a whole feature on contemporary rug hookers in Canada. Crystal is one of those rug hookers. So yeah, this was a great episode, but I mostly wanted to remind you, and I will be putting this up. I think I already put it up in our Facebook group, Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. Crystal has her book is coming out like now with what was the press? It's not Schiffer. C&T. I think it's C&T. Crystal Ross. Her beautiful, very clean, super contemporary, light, bright, but also very historical rugs. She has a full-length book coming out in the very near future, and I have advertised it for us in our Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club on Facebook. But if you're not on Facebook, look her up on Amazon. The book is available for pre-order. I've already seen the book in full, and I've reviewed the book. Glowing reviews. We will look at it and talk about it together. I think she's such an important artist. She's such a great friend, and she's such a great friend to the history of this art, this craft, right? She's like rug hooking royalty because she comes from like she can trace back to like the Chetty Camp school of rug hooking, her family. She's an amazing person. I love her, and I can't wait to see her book. And I hope you're going to support her by getting her book. Man, we still have a bunch left. Let's whiz through them. Oh, Home is Where the Heart Is. This was a great episode on a Friday night. This was about the house in rug hooking, the motif of the house. So I looked at a series of rugs where there was a house in every rug, and we were talking about the designs, and we were talking about symbolism. And this was a super cozy and heartfelt episode about almost everybody's favorite motif, right? So many people, I think it's probably the number one motif among rug makers. It's the house. So just checking my phone because I heard it buzz. I was hoping it wasn't Teddy saying, "Why aren't you here?" But it's not time yet. this was kind of, I peeled off of the house motif. God, look at this lipstick. And in this episode, I specifically still talking about houses, but I talked about the storybook cottage. The storybook cottage, most of the storybook rugs that we see are either from the 1920s and 30s that have a storybook cottage in them, or they're, what's her name? Cushing, again, owns all of the patterns. I want to say Alina Akers or something like that. Alina Akers, I think, something like. She does all of the new that look like old time postcards, storybook cottage rugs. And I talked in this episode not just about specifically the storybook cottage in rug hooking, but also about storybook cottages and how they arose first in California around Hollywood, right? That sort of magic of the paper moon and the cardboard sets at that time. People started, there was this craze for storybook cottages. They were magical. They looked like the English cottage, country cottage on steroids. And I talked about the history of architecture, the storybook cottage, and then how it translated to rug hooking design. This was another great episode that I hope you saw. If not, come on. I was talking in this episode about Hedy von Gerp, who in her book, Hooked on Tan Cook. She had recently had an exhibit. I went into huge detail on her original rugs that were at the exhibit. And Tan Cook is an island in Canada. I think it's near Toronto. This was an epic episode. It really was. She was on in the thread. We were asking and answering questions. Her work was so different. It is so different. It was an important discovery for me to find her. And it's important, I think, for you to know her name and for us to look for more work from Hedy von Gerp. This episode on October 12th, Burnout Rugs in Mid-Century Design. So coming back to the conversation, if you like it, on modern designs and big, huge commercial outfits that were producing patterns and kits for rug making, whether it was latch or it was hooking, that were strong mid-century designs. Strong, modernist MCM, super stylized, right? Very different stuff than we see now. And which big name companies were doing it at that time. That's what that episode was about. I think you can tell what this episode was about. I almost passed out during this episode because this stupid hat was so hot, and I didn't want to take it off because I felt like it was festive, but man, I almost expired during this episode. This was a Halloween episode, and I happened to have received in the mail Hooking on the Hill by Nancy Butts Thompson, which will always remain one of my favorite books of all time. It is a book about this group of rug hookers in Georgia and how they get together in Nancy's place, which is like a rug hooking shop up on the hill. And they have this regular sort of socializing get-together meetings, and about so many photos of the rugs that they were working on over time and stories. They would get together and eat and hook and just have these amazing parties. Is there a live one for 1/13/2025? So Barb says, is there a live one for 1/13/2025? Interesting. Let me check. Oh, shoot. Teddy did write me. I'm at dismissal. Okay, I'm going to give him the thumbs up. I thought it was 12:30. Uh-oh. Let me answer that question, and then I'm going to scoot. 1/13. Today is 1/13. Yep. So this is recorded, and Barb, it will be on. As soon as it's loaded, it'll be up in like an hour forever. So it'll be there for you if you have to go. Let me be naughty and just see. I'm gonna just flip through. I'm gonna be on for one more minute. I swear. I'm not gonna keep him waiting. He's just getting to the door anyway, which means he'll be in line forever. Wall Street Journal, right? We've been talking about the Wall Street Journal ever since. From Rags to Riches. This was a beautiful book about Northern England, the tradition of rug hooking around mining communities in the north of England. Two more. Praddy, okay, episode on Praddy, lots of classes on Praddy. And Agnes Vermouth, I know you remember this episode. It was absolutely fantastic. She taught rug hooking in the basement of her house. And then remember, I went online and found her house because it was for sale at one point. And we looked at the photos of the basement, and her whole rug hooking studio was still set up as built-ins. I have to go. I'm being very bad. It was great being with you again and celebrating the first year and a half of this channel, Ribbon Candy Hooking. Couldn't be here without you, obviously. Huge extra thanks to Patreon members. I will see you soon. Look out for the next episode. I have to see when it will be because I plan to record a live episode with Pierre Sylvain in anticipation of Martin Luther King Day. I plan to do that this week. So stay alert for what's coming up this week. Have a great afternoon, everybody. I will see you soon. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Oh, God. Sorry. I will see you soon. Ah, I did it again.